Welcome to Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Merrill, Executive Director of the Equality State Policy Center. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today. It sounds like you have quite a bit of public comment on this, so I won't take a ton of your time. I did submit written comments, and I'm not going to rehash those, but I am here to testify in support of the concept of an individual income tax in Wyoming. And if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to share just a few slides here.
Sure. For the time being, we'll make sure they're appropriate.
I promise. So I just kind of want to give you a sense of what's going on in some other states in terms of a personal income tax. This is Utah, and you could see here that the rates graduate, from 0.3% to a top marginal rate of 4.4%. And this is North Dakota. It's more modest, 0.2 up to 1.7%. Idaho, similar to Utah, the top marginal rate is 4.6% on income tax. Very similar in Kansas, 4.4% top marginal rate, and it graduates depending on your income there. This is Nebraska, again, very similar. And this is Montana, very similar top marginal rate. And this is Oklahoma, similar, a little more modest. And this is Georgia. Now, I want to suggest that you might want to consider, as opposed to implementing an income tax based on a certain income tax level, because of the wisdom of our Constitution, we have the opportunity to consider just a flat tax for everybody. And so I want you to imagine a flat tax, for example, a flat tax of 8%. In this case, if you're in the lowest 20%, if you're earning less than $26,000, you're not going to pay any state income tax. If you're earning less than basically $50,000, you're not going to pay any state income tax. And then you start paying a little bit once you get over 50,000. And the top marginal rate there would be like 5.4%. If you considered a 7% flat tax for everybody, then that won't really kick in an income tax until you're making over 70,000. And then the top marginal rate there would be 4.4%, something very similar to a lot of our surrounding states. So that might be a way to go when you're considering a personal income tax in Wyoming. Just consider a flat tax for everybody, as opposed to singling out a certain income level. And that might be a little bit more fair, first of all, because you pay a little bit more the more means you have, and we don't even, because of our Constitution, we don't even really have to mess with dialing knobs in terms of like what the progressive tax would look like. You can just allow people to get credit for their sales tax and their property taxes, and that that kind of graduated thing you see in other states, it will kind of play out naturally in Wyoming. At least that's my sense of things. I will of course defer to experts like Mr. Noble on all the things I got wrong here, but it seems to me that might be something you can consider to maybe simplify things and maybe make it feel a bit more fair to the people of Wyoming. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Merrill? No, Senator Case, maybe? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Merrill, I'm kind of intrigued by the flat tax idea. I think you and I have kind of visited a few times. On the face of it, a flat tax is certainly not a progressive tax. In fact, kind of regressive on that face. But I'm intrigued by your thinking that because of our Constitution and the credits that have to be applied based on other taxes paid, that somehow that would undo the regressivity and maybe overcompensate for it. And I have a little trouble with that, especially with since we don't tax food, for example, which is arguably the most regressive part of it. But I'm partly intrigued in a positive way because I've always felt that our discussions about individual taxes in Wyoming being progressive or regressive miss the totality of our entire tax structure and the fact that there is some offsetting things for all of us in terms of regressivity, progressivity, because the mineral industry carries the bulk of the whole freight in Wyoming. So can you talk more about why you think it comes out that way? Maybe more progressive in its end than regressive because of the constitutional credits?
Mr. Merrill, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, yeah, I think the way I'm thinking about it is, as it stands now, with the lack of an income tax, any income tax whatsoever, Wyoming has one of the more regressive tax structures on its face in the country, because as a percentage of your income, as I showed you in that one slide, the less you make, the more you pay in taxes in Wyoming as a percentage of your income. Now, to me, the essential step in fixing that, a lot of people call that an upside down tax structure, is to implement an income tax. And because of the wisdom of our Constitution, we can essentially accomplish or go a long way toward fixing that regressive structure by simply implementing a flat tax that credits people as our Constitution requires for the sales tax and the property taxes they pay. And given that credit, if we set that flat tax at the right level, say 6, 7, 8%, then it will by its nature be progressive. And in total, the taxes people pay will be more progressive in Wyoming than they are now.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Case.
I'd like to go into that a lot more. And I look forward to that in the future. I don't think it will pan out that way, but I also need to make the point that even though it's regressive on its face, our regressivity compared to actual taxes paid by people in the same income tax bracket or tax bracket for all these types of taxes in other states, we're completely different. So as an excise tax, for example, on goods, a sales tax, imposed in Wyoming, we could break it up into all these income categories. But if you took those poor people in Wyoming and compared how much taxes they actually paid compared to the same income category of people in any other state, I think we would come out to be less. They pay less taxes. So it's within our tax system. It appears regressive in the sense that we understand about disposable income and what you buy. The math is there. But when you compare everybody's situations, because of the mineral industry in Wyoming, we are all paying less than we would if we were the same income category in any other state, including the very poor. I want to get with you and spend all day talking about this, and we can use some help. I appreciate you bringing it up. I don't think it pans out like you might think it does, but I could be wrong. It really could be. Thank you.
So the question to you, Mr. Merrill, was would you check with Senator Case later today and discuss with him taxation policy
Not today.
after he recovers from this meeting? Brooklyn Conley, do you have a question for Mr. Merrill?
I do, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, and I too am very intrigued about the conversation that is going on between Mr. Merrill and Senator Case. And in particular, I'm curious about, Mr. Merrill, your analysis as it relates to, in particular, our taxation of property at 9.5% of assessed valuation. That to me seems to make us very different than other places in the country. But that being said, just to be clear about your testimony, is it the testimony of the SPC that you would like to see this bill go forward, but without the $200,000 exemption and with a higher rate? And if that is true, what is that higher rate that your organization is suggesting?
Mr. Merrill.
Mr. Chairman, the simple answer is yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative McConnelly, that is the intent of my testimony. We do support this bill going forward. And I would suggest considering getting rid of that income threshold and raising the flat rate to somewhere between 6 and 8%.
Okay. Further questions to the SPC? Not seeing any at this time. Thank you for being here, Mr. Merrill. Enjoy your Friday. Next up, Mr. Gagliardi from the NFI